Okay, so my motor is completely apart. I have the cases split in half. Here is the top half and the bottom half. The only thing I have left inside the bottom half are the selector arms for the transmission and the oil pressure release valve. I left those in there. Made sure the oil pressure release valve works properly, and ready to start putting it back together. Start by putting the main bearings in the upper half, and then get the crank fit in there, the balancers, and then the transmission shafts. Okay, so these are the bearings. These are the white bearings because I'm doing the 994 big bore kit. I'm using the Carrillo rods. All the bearings have a groove and a little notch right there, so you want to make sure those are lined up. You want to lube both sides of the bearings when you put them into the case. This is the lube I'm using. It's the Torco engine assembly lube. In the book it suggests to use a molybdenum, 50% grease, 50% engine oil. This is supposed to be the same thing, so this is what I'm using instead of that. I'm going to get some of the lube, put it on both sides of the bearing. Just going to kind of smear it with my finger. Make sure the notch is lined up. Kind of just give it a squeeze from the sides, and it should just pop right in. It's sitting in there pretty nice. Do that for all four. Just getting the edges so it slides in. It's kind of a tight fit first, but it just goes in pretty smooth. I don't really need that much, it seems like. So after you have the bearings all nice and lubed up, go ahead and get your timing chain. Put it over the teeth where it goes. Go ahead and drape it into the slot, and crank should just set right on, nice and easy. Just like that. Next thing you want to do is put on your rods. I'm using the Carrillo rods. There's no left, right, or front, back to these rods. I think you just want to make sure you keep your caps lined up the way they came. So I just put a little black line on there so they'll line up. Work on one at a time. I've already put my bearings in this one. It's the same thing. You just want to use your Torco lube both sides up, and then they'll just kind of pop right in. There's a little notch that you want to line up. There's only one way that they'll go. The Carrillo rods come with this fastener assembly lubricant, and you put this all over the thread. I think you apply it generously. And then you also put it under the cap of the bolt. Looks like they come pre-lubed. I'm just going to put some more on anyway for safe measure. This video might get a little choppy at this point because I actually went ahead and put the balancers in already, and then realized that the rods won't go in without being able to pull the crank out just a little bit. So I took the balancers out. Just not a big deal. You're supposed to torque these bolts to 45 foot-pound. So now that I got the bolts and the heads of the bolts all lubed up. I'm just going to go ahead and try to thread them on. I'm assuming this is going to be kind of difficult. Let's see, make sure they're lined up. I'm just going to go ahead and put the writing on the rear here. Flies out of there. And these rods actually have little what are they called? Little dowels. So you know when they're lined up properly. You're not going to be able to push them on all the way by hand because it's kind of tough for them to get in there. Just going to evenly tighten the bolts until the caps press on. Looks like those are both pretty even now. Caps are pressed down all the way. We'll begin torquing the rods. First torque them both to 30 Nm, and then followed up by 60, and I'm going to do that just evenly, progressively. Just doing about a quarter turn on each one until I get to my torque setting. Knew this is gonna happen. Looks like it's gonna be a two-man job. Alright, so I have the rods put on, so now I'm going to torque them down, so just do one at a time, evenly. So I'm just going like a quarter turn on each one, just so they go evenly until you reach that. Okay, so there's 30 on the first one. It's 30 on the second. Move over to the second rod. Same thing. Okay, there's 30 on the first one. 30 on the second. Then you want to change your torque wrench to 61 Newton meters, which is the final torque setting, and then they should be good to go. Alright. You can really feel how on these Acrylo rods how durable these threads and bolts are. Feel super solid. So those are both at 61. Acrylo rods, on the website it says the proper way to do this is actually measure bolt stretch. So you like put the bolt in, see how much sticks out, and then you tighten it, and then you see how much it's stretched. But I'm just going off of what I was told over by Triumph Performance USA. They've done a bunch of these, and they know exactly what it should be. And actually, the rods, they won't swing through into the cylinder slot with the crank in. So you actually do have to lift the crank out before you put the balancers in, and let the rod spin through into the openings, and then you can put your balancers in. Again, make sure your timing chain is also on the correct mark. The crank should spin nice and easy. Alright, so after you have the crank put in, put the front balancer in. Make sure the bearings are nice and lubed inside the front balancer with clean engine oil. And when you do this, there's a dot, a timing dot right here, and there's also one on the crank, and you just want to match those up. So go ahead and just put those dots, match them right up, and then you could kind of spin it down into position. Make sure the teeth don't fall out of mark, and then once it's in position, you could slide the rod through the center here. Let's see here. Just like that. Okay, after you have the front balancer in, you're supposed to reuse these retaining screws, but I'm just going to reuse it, and I cleaned it off completely with some parts cleaner and put some red thread lock on there. And just line up the locking washer into the slot of the balancer. Pretty self-explanatory. And gonna just throw that in. So you want to go ahead and torque this to 12 Nm. Make sure your notches are lined up on your timing marks. Okay, after doing the front balancer, do the same thing with the rear. Make sure the bearings are lubed, fresh engine oil. Go ahead and find your timing mark. Line up the dots. It's the same dot as the front, and then go ahead and kind of give it a spin as you get it into place roughly. Go ahead and slide it through. Line up your slot with this little piece right here. It's the ignition pickup coil guide, I believe. Just like that. Once it's lined up, make sure your timing marks are still good on both sides. The dots line up there perfect, and you should be able to spin it over to the other side. Make sure your timing chain doesn't catch, and also lines up on the front. So go ahead and put some thread lock on your retaining screw and 12 Nm on the front as well. Now that the crank and the balancers are both in, I'll install the transmission shafts. I never took mine apart because I didn't have a need to. So if you have to put them back together, you gotta look at the book. But mine are as is when I took them out. So for the input shaft, you just line up this hole and that hole right there, and you gotta make sure that the circlip, which is still fit into the case here, just lines up into the groove with the bearing. It should just slide right in. Yep, and it's all lined up nice and easy. So then same thing on my output shaft, is completely intact. The only thing you have to do is put a new oil seal on it, and that just slides on where the old one was. You get a smear of new motor oil, put it on the inside lip, And should be the same deal with this one. You just line up the pin in the hole and line up your circlip. Go. Just slides right in there. Alright, once your transmission shafts are in there, to know that it's in neutral, when you put it all back together, you want to get your selector forks in the right position. That's another step away, but you want to make sure that you can spin both of them independently and freely, and you do that by sliding. There's like little knobs on each of these gears right here, and you just want to disengage all of them so none of them are touching. Slide this one right here kind of in the middle, slide this one right here kind of in the middle, and then slide this one out, and then let's see, there it is right there. That's neutral. Once you got transmission, crank, balancers put into the top half, move over to the bottom half. I already had my selector forks and selector drum. I had them left in, so all you want to do is make sure that the selector forks are all in the grooves in the drum, and if you spin the drum all the way, I guess clockwise, so the middle shaft is at the end of where it could go. That should almost line up neutral for you. This little indent right here is actually neutral. So that is where you want to line up your detent arm, which is what we're going to install right now. You want to put that on before you put your actual gear change shaft on. To put the detent arm on, you want to get your spring. The shouldered washer goes on the inside. Going to put the spring on, and then the small washer goes on the outside. You want to clean the bolt off with some degreaser or brake cleaner, and apply some new red thread lock to the end of that bolt. Go ahead and put your bolt through your whole detent assembly, and just thread it in a couple times into the shaft right there where it goes. And to line this up, it's kind of tricky because of the spring, but you want to kind of push it all in as best as possible, line it up like that, and then you're going to finish it off by screwing it in. So I think it's actually easiest to just get the spring around the detent arm itself before putting it into the spot where it goes in the engine. Screw your bolt in. And get a little screwdriver. And get that spring into the motor casing where it belongs. You want to make sure the selector forks, when you're doing this, all have a little bit of movement. If they lock up, then you may have to actually take the selector fork shaft out and realign them. Alright, so here's a close-up of the detent arm engaged in neutral. You can see it's on the small gear right here. That's how you know it's in neutral. And then also on the selector forks, you want to make sure all of them have a little bit of movement to it. If any of them are too tight, then it might not engage properly. So after you got your detent arm in, then you could go ahead and slide your gear change mechanism on. Mine's already intact. I I didn't disassemble it, so if you want to put it back together, look at the book and see how all the pieces go. You want to take off the outside circlip and washer, and make sure you have the washer and circlip installed on this near side here. Put a little engine oil on the shaft so it slides through, and go ahead and just slide it in. Push it through the other side, and the spring, it's going to engage around the centralizing pin here. Then on the other side, you just fit your washer on, then you fit your circlip on. Alright, so I just applied this 3-bond 1194 gasket. Everywhere, if you have the book, it's everywhere it says in the book. It's basically all around the edges. Everything that's going to be exposed, you want to apply that stuff, and you want to keep it away from any oil holes that you see. One in particular that I see is on the input shaft of the transmission. There's a little oil hole right there. You want to make sure that's not clogged. You don't have to put any where cases are going to cover it. And when you put the stuff on, apply it pretty generously. Now that you have that on, what you want to do is you're ready to put the cases together. You want to make sure your dowels are in. There's 3 locating dowels on the top half of the case, and you want to get your transmission. Make sure it's in neutral. And then when you put these cases together, you just want to align the selector forks up. So it's good to use a screwdriver if you have to, and get in there while you're doing it. So Nick, if you want to grab this case, and just go ahead and flip it over so the crank is gonna, these spots right here, all gonna go on first. You kind of just evenly put it on.
So just hold it above and you'll line it up?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it's probably easiest if you want to hold it
from this side here.
Side of it like that. There you go. So, a second here. Okay. So, I don't know if you want to kind of kneel down so you could see these selector forks right here. You kind of want to fall onto these spaces. Okay. That looks pretty fucking close already. Okay, keep going. Not quite, but there are little dowels and it should just pop in. It looks like pretty fucking close. I'll just give it a slide my way.
Sure.
There.
Easy.
Perfect.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be harder. Piece of cake.
And yeah, and it's in neutral. The reason I could tell it's in neutral is because I could hold the input shaft here, and then on the output shaft on the other side, I could just spin them individually. Alright, after you get the cases put together, I made this little assembly right here that had all my bolts in it. Basically, you just want to take each bolt out, put them where they go, make sure your bolts are all cleaned off. I just used some parts cleaner to clean them off, and put them all back in where they went, and go ahead and start by hand tightening them before you get to the torquing stage. Alright, so once you hand tighten all the bolts on the bottom half of the case, you want to do the same thing with the top, and I got mine all laid out. Okay, after you've hand tightened all the bolts on the bottom, flipped it over, hand tightened all the bolts on the top, then you want to move on to stage 1 of the tightening sequence, and that is tightening all the the bottom half bolts to 10 Newton meters. You want to make sure you go in order that it says in the book. We got number 1 right here. After you tighten all the bolts in the bottom half, flip it back over. You want to torque all these ones to stage 1, which is 10 Newton meters on all the bolts, and same thing, just making sure you go in order. You want to move on to stage 2 of the torquing process. Stage 2 is torquing bolts 1 through 8 to 40 Newton meters, and that's the final torquing for those, so that's where they'll stay. You want to move on to bolts 9 through 19. Those are all going to be torqued to 28 Newton meters. This is a 2002 motor, so if you have a newer motor, some of those torque values are a little different, but those are the torque values for this motor in particular. Alright, after you finish doing stage 3 on the bottom half, flip the motor over. Stage 3 on the top half, same thing, 28 Newton meters. Make sure you follow the sequence. Okay, so after you have all the bolts torqued on the case, you want to put the sump on. The first part of putting the sump on is putting the oil pipe on. You want to fit it with 2 new crush washers. Those bolts want to be torqued to 8 Newton meters. After you put the breather pipe on, you want to put the strainer on. Make sure your strainer is nice and clean and there's no debris in there. Use some parts cleaner to spray it out, and then I just got my hose and just put it in there and kind of blew as much water through there as possible, and then I got air compressor and just shot air through it, and it's pretty clean now. Put some blue thread lock on your bolts. Make sure those bolts are clean before you put that on, and make sure your O-ring is fitted into the bottom and it's not going to fall out of its position. I'm going to just press that on there. And these bolts want to be torqued to 6 Newton meters. Okay, now go ahead and put your sump cover on. Make sure the surface for the gasket is nice and clean. Clean it off with some parts cleaner. Line your holes up. Looks good. Make sure your bolts are all clean. And all these want to be torqued to 12 Newton meters. You want to do this in a crisscross pattern. Alright, next you want to put on your starter motor. I'm going to fit it with a new O-ring. Smear a little bit of grease. Over it and the shaft. Slide right in there. Get your new bolts, or not your new bolts, get your bolts. Those want to be tightened to 10 Newton meters. Alright, now I'm going to put the oil pumps on. We'll start with the rear oil pump. You want to get a new O-ring for the breather tube and also a new crush washer for that one as well. You want to lubricate your pumps with some clean engine oil. That's my phone ringing. And then just go ahead and hand tighten the screws in, just so that you get them in there. Get your breather pipe, go ahead and fit that into its housing there. Presses in nice and easy. And go ahead and fit your front on. And you want to torque the bolts on here to 12 Newton meters. Now go ahead and put your oil pump gears on. Alright, next you want to fit on the clutch. First you want to lubricate your shaft with some clean engine oil. hit the outside of your shouldered bush, the inside. Inside your bush on. Then get your drive gear. I'm going to slide that on with the little teeth facing out. You want to get that to engage in the oil pump gears there. Then you want to get your clutch drum. Make sure the bearings and the drive gear are nice and lubed, and also the bearings and the drum are lubed. And then you want to line up the little knobbies here and engage them into the clutch drum. Your clutch drum is also going to engage with your crank gear, and when you're putting this on, you just kind of want to spin it until it engages. There you go. And now you can see oil gears going and the crank going. Okay, on your clutch basket, make sure all your clutch plates are lubricated in oil. If they're brand new, make sure you soak them overnight. This is the Barnett heavy duty clutch, and basically when you put these on, one of these friction plates here is thinner than the rest of them. That one goes first onto the basket. Follow that by a metal plate. And your next friction plate, then a middle plate, and then go ahead and follow that up by putting on and this is going to just slide into the basket. You want to make sure your teeth are all lined up. Just gotta twist that around a little bit. That should go. After you get the basket on, I'm going to slide your washer on. It's labeled out. Get your nut. Alright, and you want to torque this nut to 105 Newton meters. I made this little counter hold tool. It says to use a Triumph specialty tool, but this is what they have in the Haynes book, and it was pretty simple to make. See how it works. My first time using it. Great. That's it? Gracias. Okay, so after you get your nut all torqued down, you want to put the clutch springs on and the spring, I guess, I don't know what you call this thing, spring plate. When you put these on, it's kind of tricky to do without the service tool, and I doubt anybody's going to have the service tool. But what you want to do is, the key to it is just tighten all the bolts as evenly as possible, and then you're actually going to use this bush here to keep it centered. So when it's all in, you want this to be able to slide freely and if it's off center at all, then this thing is basically going to get stuck in there. It's super sensitive because it's a really snug fit. So first thing you want to do is get your springs. I have the green springs, so I got the Barnett kit. Put them over your post here, and then make sure your bush is all the way in, and you just want to slide this into the hole and just kind of press it up against there, and then get your bolts and just put them in as lightly as possible. You just don't want to have any bolt pulling more than the other bolt, so really just get them going. Don't really tighten them beyond any kind of tension that you feel. Now they're all just in by hand. This should still slide in and out no problem. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going by hand here a little bit. And then always just check if this slides in and out. See, it's already tight, even though it's doing that even. It's stuck in there, so I got to start over. Okay, so I backed them all the way back out, and trying a different technique, which is basically just doing it all by hand. Whatever one's loose, I tighten. Whatever one I can. And it seems to be keeping it pretty even, so I'm going to try this technique. Alright, so that technique seemed to work a little better. I got them all the way in, pretty much to the base, and as you can see, that still slides out nice and smooth. So I'm going to torque each one of them to 9 Newton meters, and in theory it should continue to slide out nice and easy. Alright, next you want to fit the sprag clutch housing to the crank shaft. Make sure the surfaces are clean before putting them on, and you want to use new bolts. If you don't have new bolts, just make sure your other ones are clean and put some red Loctite on them. The ones from the factory, they come with some like Loctite stuff already on them. Well, these want to be tightened to 16 Newton meters. Alright, next you want to put on your idler gear, and that is your idler gear, your shaft, and this is a little wavy washer. You want to make sure you have that, it's very important. And just engage that gear with your starter there. Make sure that's connected, and then you want to get your starter driven gear. You want to lubricate the inside of the sprag gear and the end of the crankshaft with clean oil. So then you want to slide your driven gear onto the sprag, engage that with your idler gear, and this should spin. It should spin clockwise, but not anti-clockwise inside the sprag. So you notice when I turn it like that, the gear in the back will stay still. Turn it backwards, and then they spin together, and that's how you want it to work. And then you want to put your breather on, your breather plate. Make sure your spacer plate is in there. That'll just slide right in the shaft and fit your new bolts. And these screws are torqued to 12 Newton meters. Next you want to turn the motor around and install the rotor. There's a woodruff key that should be, you want to make sure that's in your crank and pressed in there properly. So you want to line that up. Make sure the shaft of the crank is nice and clean, and also the inside. Make sure there's no metal attached to the back of the rotor, because it is a giant magnet. So just make sure that's all clean, and then it's ready to be pressed on. Okay. Once that's on, you want to get your washer, and then go ahead and thread that in. So when you torque this, you're going to need an extra set of hands. Have someone counter hold it with a tool like this. I think this should work. Also, before you put the bolt in, you want to measure if it's a M10 bolt or a M12 bolt, because they have different torque values. I measured this one's an M10 bolt. You want to torque the M10 to 98 Newton meters, and the M12 is 120 Newton meters. There we go. Okay, now you want to measure your top piston ring gap. The top ring is the shiny ring, and this is, like I said, this is the 994 big bore kit, so these rings are going to be different than the stock ones. When you're measuring the end ring gap, you just want to fit the ring into the top of the cylinder bore. I'm going to make it so just a bit of it sticks up over the top all the way around. Make it so you could just fill an edge. And then I get my handy little flat level surface. I'm just going to run it along the top. And when you run your finger over it, it shouldn't feel like it should just feel completely smooth. You want to get your filler gauges. This gap wants to be at 14 thousandths. So just start out with a smaller filler gauge and work your way up. It should just slide in. So it's the last size that will fit in, and in my instance it's 0.005. So what you got to do is you got to grind these piston rings, and you should use a specialty tool. I don't have one, so I'm going to go down to the shop and bring my cylinder in and have them do that for me. What the piston ring grinder is, it's basically a wheel, a grind wheel with a little hand crank on it, and that ensures that it's grinding evenly, and you just basically use hand pressure to do it. So the second ring on these are what I've told, pretty much always dialed in. I already measured one, and it was exactly at 14 thousandths. The other one, I'm just not going to measure because I lied about the second ring. You should also measure that one, because I just measured mine and it was actually a little tighter than 14 thousandths. It was 12 thousandths. So I'm also going to take that one and have that one ground down too. Alright, now you want to fit your rings onto your pistons. The first ring you want to put on into the bottom groove here. You want to make sure the arrow is facing up. These are the pistons that come with the 994 big bore kit. So you want to first put this expander ring on. Don't overstretch any of the rings because they will break. And the gap on this one wants to be positioned at 6 o'clock. Okay, and then you have your two other, I guess, oil control rings. And both of these are the same. And one goes on the top of it and one goes on the bottom. And one wants to be at 9 o'clock and one wants to be at 3 o'clock. It doesn't matter which one goes which way. So the bottom rings are set. Next you want to put on your second ring. It's going to be different on the original ones, but like I said, these are for the 994 big bore kit. So you want to put the black ring on next, and the gap on that is going to be 1 o'clock. You want to make sure the writing is facing upwards. and then your top ring is the, for this kit is the chrome ring, riding facing upwards, and that's going to be at 7 o'clock. Alright, after you get the rings put on the pistons, you want to